Very warm welcome to everybody, panellists and attendees. I'm Tessa, I'm chair of Young Dementia Network. The network aims to improve young onset dementia support and services nationally. And part of how we can do that is by listening to each other and by learning from each other's experience. And these webinars aim to offer us the platform and the opportunity to do that. During the webinar, feel free to use the question function and the chat function. We'll allocate some time toward the end for question and answers, and we've got an experienced panel here to respond. Hope you've all got a cup of tea, mug of tea next to you, alongside you, and without further ado, Damian's offering up his cup of tea. I'll hand over to Liz and the rest of our panels.
Thank you, Tessa. So welcome to Adaptability. This is a webinar-based discussion about adapting to a diagnosis of dementia. Over the next hour, we're aiming to cover some of the issues and practicalities of receiving a diagnosis. So my name's Liz Rose. I'm a young onset dementia advisor working in the Oxfordshire area. And I work in a post-diagnosis service that includes one-to-one sessions. We do information days and courses and generally offer support to those who are newly diagnosed. And I'm very proud and pleased to introduce my panel. So Edward, could you give us just a brief introduction?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Edward Bushnell. I was diagnosed with posterior cortical atrophy in May 2019, and I'm now living as positively and successfully as I can with the condition.
Thank you, Edward. Let's go to Helen and Philip.
Yes, thank you, Liz. I'm Philip Robbins, and I am living with Lewy body disease, compounded by some symptoms from Parkinson's, notably tremors and fatigue. And I was diagnosed in 2016. As you can see, an aspect of my dementia is that my numeracy skills have gone right out the window. So, but I know that I'm not the only one with whom that's the case. Anyway, Philip Robbins.
Thank you, Philip.
I'm Helen Robbins. I'm Philip's wife, companion, and now carer, although that word carer doesn't sit well at the moment. But yes, technically I'm a carer. As Philip said, he was diagnosed 4 years ago. I no longer work. I had a background in management, and we are both adapting together.
Thank you, Helen. And last but certainly not least, Damian.
Hi, I'm Damian Murphy. I have two hats. One is as a Director of Innovations in Dementia, and the other hat is one as a facilitator of York Minds and Voices group, which is a member of the DEEP network, a group of peers of people living with dementia here in York, where I'm based.
Thank you, Damian. So we thought that we would start our webinar with a bit of a poll that we're going to throw out to the audience that's watching. So we've got a question for you, which is, do you think people are well supported to adapt to their diagnosis of young onset dementia? And I'm hoping, there we go, that the poll will come up. So you should be able to interact with us all and put your answers down. So the question again is, do you think people are well supported to adapt to their diagnosis of young onset dementia? With the answers, yes, no, it depends, not sure, no idea. So we'll just let you fill that out. I think it's quite a good question to ask, actually, just to see what you know, the general consensus is. So we'll give you a bit longer, and then we'll get the results up. There we go. I feel like we need a drum roll. Do, 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 do.
Can be arranged.
Yes. And here are the results. Oh, a resounding no from our audience. So with 59% saying no, the support, yeah, people aren't well supported. I can see Edward nodding. So yeah, I mean, sadly that's why the Young Dementia Network exists, so that we can improve services for younger people. So thank you everyone for filling that out. There you go. So I'll get rid of that. We'll close. So we will have a bit of time for questions at the end of our discussion. So please do feel free to use the function at the bottom of the screen, so you can ask some questions and we can answer. But let's get started on our discussion. So I'm going to go to Edward first. Edward, could you tell us what kind of support you were offered when you first received your diagnosis, and what's helped you to adapt?
Okay. As I said earlier, I was diagnosed in May 2019. The support that's been offered to me after diagnosis, generally speaking, has been okay, but it's not been fantastic by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, from a medical point of view, my GP and my consultant have been great, but you know, up until recently, because of the COVID situation, I've been having to do telephone meetings with my consultant, but that has now changed in that I saw her face-to-face last week. So we're back to some air of normality there. I think as far as Young Dementia UK is concerned, you know, the meetings that I've had have been absolutely brilliant, and I feel very supported, and I feel as though I've moved forward in terms of getting to grips with my diagnosis. I think that's the key part for me. You know, I say wider UK have been superb. So you know, things like the PACE group, quizzes, and things such as that. You know, the socials have been, some of them have been hilarious. You know, it's been a very positive experience. And then I suppose from there, the other people to talk about is their dementia support, because I have a diagnosis of posterior cortical atrophy. They have been very, very helpful, and supported me through various things, such as Samantha and I both ended up on a couples situation and on a couples course, which was great for both of us. Samantha didn't feel so isolated anymore, so that was a very positive thing. What else? So they've involved me in small discussion groups, which I've just mentioned. They've also done things about care planning, LPAs, lasting powers of attorney, and so on. So yeah, it's been incredibly useful to be part of this RDS support group. So I've enjoyed that. Yeah, I mean they've got the other things they've done. Yeah, they've done care planning. Sorry, I've mentioned all that already. Forgive me. My dementia.
Forgiven.
I tend to repeat myself. So, it's as I say, forgive me. So, is there anything else that you think I've missed, Liz, that I should have added?
No, I mean, I think what's great is that it seems like you've really been proactive, actually, in going to groups and accessing things like the Rare Dementia Society, and just, you know, you're proactive in discussing your diagnosis and receiving the information.
And lobbying my MP as well.
Oh,
I give her a hard time all the time, because I'm fed up with, you know, the attitude of people and towards dementia in general, and so I'm forever rattling her cage, I think is the phrase, to get benefits and support as much as we can. Tessa's been involved in some of those as well, some of that emails and support that we've done. That's me.
Thank you, Edward. Let's go to Philip and Helen, and I'm going to ask you, Philip, the same question. What's really helped you adapt to your diagnosis?
Well, it would be very useful if I could take a couple of minutes answering the previous question, as is the time-honoured tradition on these panel talk shows. The situation was that in 2016, sorry again, I knew I had a problem, and I knew it was a serious problem, but I didn't know at all what it was. So much so that in the course of about a 6 or 8 month period, I had all sorts of tests, 2 tests for brain tumors, 2 tests for cancer, for bowel cancer, and for lung cancer. And my first investigation was actually with the ear, nose and throat department. So it was really interesting to see that everybody was seized of the matter, but they couldn't get their hands around it. I couldn't, but neither could some of the senior consultants who were on my case. So this I knew there was something wrong because of the effect that it was having on my behavior and my ability to navigate the things that I needed to navigate. I mean, I think the low point for me was probably when I'm an academic by nature, by profession. The biggest problem that I had was when I completely dried up in the middle of a master's lecture, and I realized that in a second, virtually, my self-confidence had disappeared. I had been working as a senior university academic for more than 24 years, but it was a remarkable just how quickly one's confidence in one's ability to perform within such context, how quickly that had been undermined and had potentially disappeared. There were also other professional situations as well, which included different aspects of supervision and so on. So when I mean, first of all, I think, and Helen will say a little bit more about this, I'm sure. Initially, we were adrift, a ship adrift, and the 3 years from the last 3 years were very much a case of trying to get under the condition that I had. So it was about addressing the medical side of things, and that's I think when things started really to improve. And as Edward has suggested, in the part of Oxfordshire where we both live, there's actually been a noticeable improvement in the atmosphere, in the services and provisions provided, and that has helped to chip away at this undermining of what otherwise would have been personal confidence, as well as in a previous life, a professional consciousness.
Absolutely.
But I was finished by then, so
work. You weren't finished, you were finished at work.
I was finished at work, medically retired, and very fortunate to be so.
Okay, so the support we received on diagnosis. Well, as Philip has said, there was a long lead time before diagnosis. So we knew something was wrong. It was a question of getting to that diagnosis. So when it actually came, it's like a sucker punch to your stomach as well as a huge relief. But what struck me, what we've struck us both, was that we were given the diagnosis by the consultant and then told, I'll see you again in 8 months. And we went home and we thought, well, is that it? And for 2 years, that was it. We didn't know anything about memory clinics. We didn't know they existed. We called our GP to tell him what the diagnosis was, and he said, oh yes, and why are you calling me? Didn't see him again. Not interested. Obviously the consultant had his clinics and he said he'd see us in eight months, so we had nothing. So we were left for 2 years on our own to navigate things, and the first thing I thought as my previous life in management was, okay, Philip is at a senior end of his career. I didn't want him to, he was still earning, we still had a mortgage, we were still supporting children. How do we navigate all the things that we have now to a place that Philip needs to be? And in my mind, I didn't want him to finish his career in a humiliating or undignified way. And I could immediately see, when your reputation at work depends so much on your individual responsibility and your status, as most of us do, that it could all end horribly. So we had to navigate that, and that was our main priority, was to get Philip from A to B, and hopefully with a medical retirement on good terms. But having said that, we both thought, well, if he can carry on working in some way, we should try and do that. So the first thing we did was contact occupational health. And occupational health at the university were very, very good and very supportive, and they were on Philip's side and wrote endless reports about adapting the work, adapting the terms and conditions. None of those reports were ever acted on. Nothing that was suggested, well, unless you took it into your own hands, nothing was suggested, not even regular meetings with a line manager, nothing, just left on his own to cope. And what was more and more duties were being piled on him. So the stress was causing even more difficulties and worsening conditions. So then we were introduced after 2 years to Young Dementia, and things just changed completely. We, instead of having no help, we had lots of help, and these are all the information leaflets and the things, the checklists of things to do and where to go for help. Suddenly, we were part of a community with help, with practical help. And one of Liz's colleagues, who is no longer working for Young Dementia, but she came to our house and she said to Philip, "Why are you still working?" And when you pose that question, and part of it is because you can just about manage, but is life now about just about managing, or is it living your best life? And from that moment, we thought, well, it's clear we have to live our best lives. And living our best lives is not coping with the work stress that's without support and help. It's about a new life. So that's where we are. And we've had fantastic help since we were introduced to Young Dementia. We now feel part of a community. As Edward said, his wife no longer felt isolated. We no longer felt isolated. We have a lot of activities we can tap into. I've waded my way through the practical checklists of things to do, and we are now sort of getting on with our lives. So that's our story.
Can I just interject and just say that I had a terrible experience with occupational health as well.
I can agree, it can be patchy.
Absolutely shocking. The guy I saw it was done on Skype, and he was aggressive, horrible, nasty, and wasn't sympathetic to my situation at all. Plus, there was no so they were supposed, my firm were supposed to give me regular reviews of my situation. They didn't at all, not once.
Yeah.
So,
but that's your employer. So yeah, presumably your occupational health advisor advised that, and your employer was the one that didn't do it.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's two things. I agree that occupational health could be a massive help. And in our 2 years before Young Dementia, that was the only help we had. And luckily, thank goodness, they were really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in your case, Edward, I feel sorry that they weren't good.
Yeah, it was a shocker.
Did you refer yourself, or did your company refer you?
No, my company referred me.
Right. Philip referred himself. So from that point of view, he took the initiative. So occupational health was working with him, and occupational health wouldn't release any information to his employer without his permission, which, we felt more in control that way. But had it been the other way, then the occupational health would be working for the company, and it's more about a capability process. And that's what I wanted to avoid completely, because since joining Young Dementia, we know so many stories of others who had to go through performance and capability procedures with a humiliating end to their career, which is horrible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sadly, it from people's experiences and your own, it's not just about adapting to a diagnosis, is it? It's adapting your whole life to a series of different services and professionals, and it's work, it's kids, it's mortgages. I mean, it's adapting to life again. Let's go to Damian. Damian, what kind of would you like to add about what can help people adapt?
Follow that. Thank you, Helen, Philip, and Edward, for those really powerful testimonies. And they echo really a lot of what people say to me, and a lot of what I've heard, and the tales people have told me over the years, and the people I've been supporting over the years. And what do I add here? What is it that people want, or what would work? I mean, you said, oh, you go over to Damian and see what he recommends. I don't think I'm the expert, but what the experts who I've spoken to recommend, very much tally with what Philip and Edward have been saying, and Helen. And so I just wanted to really reiterate, so many people at that time of diagnosis have got so many unanswered questions, and for me, what works and what we've been trying to do, certainly with Minds and Voices, is to provide a space for people with dementia recently diagnosed to be able to answer a lot of the questions that they've got following the diagnosis, which could have been months away. And people are still saying, well, what is this? Questions like, how long have I got? Questions like, what does it mean about my relationships? What's going to happen? All those things. People are left, and as Philip, you said, that massive blow to confidence. That's a huge thing. It's one of the first things that needs redressing, if you want. And our group and Minds and Voices were saying only the other day, we fortunately got a big, we were in a webinar with about 200 GPs in Yorkshire, and they actually listened to us, which is fantastic. And we were saying, okay, look, you can't wave a magic wand to make this go away, but you can, at least say, look, there's a life worth lived. Don't just give us the doom and gloom side and nothing else, because we're expecting them to turn into some sort of gibbering wreck overnight, because that's what we understand what dementia is, because we've read it in the papers, and all these, and all they get is something vague about powers of attorney and driving ringing in their ears, after this devastating, with all these unanswered questions and nowhere to go really. And what was striking as well about Edward and Philip's situation, serendipity plays too great a part in how people access, sometimes just pure luck, whether people access things. Edward, you said, you're very proactive. What about those people who aren't so proactive, or as Julie's been saying on the thing, who are people on their own? How do you get to access what really works for you when the people providing services often don't know what's out there? And I was seeing some stats recently, a big element of why people don't get diagnosed is because there's nothing out there, and there is this huge amount, as we've just heard. And so yeah, the implications and the myriad of questions that people have need answering in a place and at a pace that's comfortable, and we like to do it amongst peers. And we had a course that Minds and Voices put together, created by them for people recently diagnosed, and they delivered it as, we call it tutors. It was great discussions. I love the idea, Edward. You said you attended couple sessions. I think it's so fun, so important. Relationships are a massive thing that really get. Traditionally, services has always been a bee in my bonnet, that traditionally services are focused either on the person with dementia or the carer or care partner and their unique set of problems in isolation of each other, as if you don't live together. And and failing to recognize that interdependence that's there. So that was really interesting. Yeah, getting to grips, Edward, is a great phrase you use. Yeah, people need support to get to grips. That's going to be really individualized. We talk about, I remember John Killick was talking about personalized, person-centered care, he says, but when it comes to diagnosis, all that goes out the window. We should have person-centered and personalized diagnoses. And I think we're far from it, as that poll suggested. Yeah, that's serendipity. And Philip, you said, I know there was something wrong. So many people with dementia are not getting asked or even consulted about, you know best what, when something's not right. And, so many people have said, just ask us. We'll tell you what we're experiencing. Don't talk over us. We've got that massive blow to confidence. Don't rub it in. And I really like that. Yeah, we want the balance. Give us a negative, but also give us a positive, living our best life. I love that phrase, Helen. And a new life. So many people say it's a new beginning, it's not the end. But that's only when they've got talking with peers to discover that. That should be one of the earliest messages, I think. And, you know, as you said, now you feel part of a community, and that sense of belonging, sense of identity, these are all things get really compromised with the onset of a dementia, and it's not fair. And I remember a chap one of the chap I met, he was 49 when he was diagnosed, and he was a headmaster of a grammar school. And, you know, listening to you, Philip, there, you know, he lived quite a while away from his school, and he was getting home about midnight and leaving and getting back at 6 o'clock in the morning because he couldn't concentrate with the kids in school. And they had an Ofsted inspection, and he got panned. The school was great; it was a grammar school. The kids taught themselves very well, you know, but he got panned, you know, and you know, it was really unfair. But I remember asking him and a group of chaps around the table once, "What's your biggest complaint about living with dementia?" And Richard put his hand up straight away and said, "Other people." And you know, that's I suppose I'll finish on that point really. But yeah, lots of indicators, I think, of ideas of what really could go around that time of diagnosis. Yeah, thanks, Liz.
Thank you, Damian. Edward, I noticed you put your thumbs up to other people. Can I get you to elaborate a bit?
Well, other people, you mean what, as in other people being involved, or sorry,
Other people make dementia harder.
Oh, they do, and it's just and I'd so empathise with what Damian said. It's just, you know, people treat you as a gibbering idiot sometimes, and you know, you still got your life in front of you. You're still okay. You know, yes, you've got difficulties. Yes, you've got problems, but by and large, you know, you're okay. You're fine. If you want a good example, I'll tell you what to do is have a look at Peter Berry has got a new book out called Slow Puncture, and it is absolutely fantastic. And I would recommend it to all of. You can get it on Kindle as well as in book form. I would recommend it to you all to get a copy of it.
Very good analogy. Slow puncture. Sorry? It's a very good analogy. Yeah. Slow puncture.
Absolutely, it's a brilliant analogy, and it takes you through all of his problems, and you know, he's been in some very, very dark places, but he's got through it, and you know, he has one of the most brilliant positive attitudes. I can't remember two minutes ago, but he's, you know, he's got a wonderful attitude, and I would recommend it to everybody to get a copy of it if you haven't already.
Thank you, Edward.
Sorry, who did you say the author was, Edward?
It's a guy. It's co-authored. The person that wrote it is called Peter Berry, Berry, but it's co-authored by his cycling partner, who's a lady called Deb Bunt, Bunt.
Thank you.
I think from my experience, it's so important to meet other people in the same situation as you. So that, as Damian said, that kind of peer support, I personally think is absolutely crucial, because you can see that how other people live, and you need role models to follow from. So this, I love Edward saying living positively, because you absolutely can. And I think when you first receive that diagnosis, you just need those people to kind of pull you kind of through that fight, you know, that initial stage.
Yeah, it can be a very lonely place. It can be a very lonely place. Yeah. Again, you don't know who to tell. You don't know when to tell them, how to tell them about it. I mean, you've got all sorts of worries about finances, not least about carrying on with work or stopping work, and all those relationships to manage. It's a huge thing to go through. And I think Philip said to me earlier that you need a team. You need a team to get you through it.
Yeah.
Good phrase.
I think as well that in the early stages of receiving your diagnosis, some people live in denial, so they don't actually admit that it is dementia. And I do think that the earlier you can come to terms with it and accept that you have, a condition, the easier it is for people. Philip, and then we'll go to Damian.
Philip, that's me. I think I accepted my diagnosis when the consultant, who very, very good, we have a very good personal relationship. He said to me, we were talking about different symptoms and, what does this mean? Where are the areas of ambivalence and so on? And in the corner, there was a DAT scan machine. What?
We went for a DAT scan.
We went for a DAT scan. I don't know if you know these DAT scans, but they're massive sort of blocks of steel. But they do at least represent. When I saw it, I was reassured by it. And he said, "Look, you've got one more chance at this, and that is to use the DAT scan. If it's positive, will you accept my diagnosis?" And I did, because I had nowhere else to go.
That was about 6 months after.
Oh yes,
the initial diagnosis. Philip was hanging out for something else. I'm not sure what else, but anything else. But
well, I had other problems, as I think probably a number of people do, and that is to be also grappling with other physical ailments. So, for instance, I had a massive number of my esophagus. I had a massive number of ulcers going down my esophagus. And it was quite clear that they were there, because I felt through acid reflux and related elements, I knew they were there. I could feel them.
So that we were offered lots of differential diagnoses at the beginning, and as I said, brain tumor was ruled out, and then there were lots of cancer investigations. So, and the dementia diagnosis came amongst this. So in a way, the dementia was sort of pushed to the back while we dealt with the cancer. Well, luckily it wasn't. None of them came out as positive, but it took a very long time to eliminate everything.
And we did get a very nice, strong, sugary cup of tea by a support worker who thought that I had already been diagnosed
with cancer. Yeah. So
and I wouldn't, name or anything like that, but it was just that was the level to which it had gone in terms of us unable to generate a plausible diagnosis, except for the DAT scan.
Anyway, so it can be a long and tortured journey, just to be then left with the dementia, because you do have to eliminate everything else. So as I said earlier, so when it actually comes, sometimes it's a relief, because then you can start having solid thoughts about what you actually are dealing with. Because before then, you're thinking, well, it could be 100 other things, and your mind is, wibbling all over the place.
And my solid thoughts were very much along the lines of, I wonder how much longer I have. They've been talking about 3 or 4 months. They've been talking about 7 or 8 months. I sort of naturally inferred from that that could be how long I had to live.
Nobody will tell you that.
No.
Because it's hiding to nothing, isn't it?
Yeah. So yeah. So in the end, we've got years and years ahead.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. And that's the only way to approach it, really. Is just assume that because my consultant, my neurologist, will not give me any possible lifespan target at all. She just won't do it. Yeah. And I kind of get why, but nevertheless, it's sort of it's you just don't know how long you're going to be around.
And that's one of the emotionally difficult and psychologically difficult things to cope with.
Yeah.
So it takes a while. It takes a good year or so, probably more, if you have, well, depending on the support you have, to get your head around those difficult concepts about not knowing, because most of us have gone through our lives thinking, there are different phases, and then eventually you might retire, and then retirement, we hadn't even reached thinking about what we were going to do in retirement. So we hadn't thought about that. And, suddenly to be having to reevaluate everything, it takes a long time to stabilize your feelings. I mean, you do need people to talk to.
You do, absolutely.
And there aren't many people around to talk to. So
apart from my lovely Yoda.
Yes.
That's Liz, by the way. Yeah. Liz is my Yoda.
Yeah.
I think it is about having somebody to talk to, and Oxfordshire, you have a Yoda, but across the country that not everybody has a Yoda. So it's important that in the future we try and provide information to people so that they can access people to talk to.
I think it's particularly what struck me is that when we've talked to people who deal generally with dementia, they talk about people who are elderly with dementia, and the people who have dementia diagnosis when they're younger have particular issues which are very different to elderly dementia in many ways. And what I spoke about the family, about money, about work, about who you are, and you haven't transitioned yet to a retirement phase. You're before all of that. So very particular, and I don't think there are enough people who understand those differences for us to talk to.
Absolutely.
Which is a good reason to pester your MP.
Yeah, which I do on a regular basis. She tells me that there's record numbers of funding going into dementia research and so on at the moment. And where is it? It sort of disappears into the ether, and you never see it again. Where is it? It's a mystery to me, and but she's adamant that they've never put more money into dementia research than currently.
Dementia as a condition has come to the forefront over the last few years than it ever did. And I know it's quite common to liken it to, so if you get a cancer diagnosis, the support and information that you get is second to none, and that's across the country. And dementia as a condition just isn't treated the same. And what I think is quite powerful is that people living with a diagnosis now are pretty much all working towards helping the people that are going to come after them to receive better information and services.
Yeah, that's very important. Putting something back in, no matter how modest. I mean, we're not medics, so we have to be careful about things. But you know, it's to support the rising generation has always got to be a function of the current generation.
There was an IES report out recently that suggested that there would be 2 million people with dementia in the not too distant future. You know,
it's mind blowing.
It's not going away. It's with us forever, and it needs to be addressed in seriously by government and the MPs.
Should that be done in the context of the pandemic or together
Say
with
again?
the pandemic? Is
Say that again.
that something that should be evaluated in the context of other major medical crises like the pandemic, for instance?
Well, I mean, I personally think that the evidence I've seen is that the funding for these situations is the funding for our group is woeful. Now that's just anecdotal. I can't put a scientific fact on that and say that's absolute. But you know, I'm not seeing it. Where is it? Where's it coming from? And who's providing it? And as I say, I just don't see any evidence of it. Perhaps Damian knows more. I don't know, but do you have any thoughts?
Not really. Yeah,
No?
you know, there's lots of research going on, obviously, all the time. They tell us, and you know, and it's about wondering about there's the care and the cure side of things, isn't there? In terms of you've got your biological stuff looking at what are the causes and how can we address that. But then there's the care side of, okay, how can we support people? What sort of research do we need to support people now? There's always been that debate and that thing, and there's a fine balance to strike, I suppose. But there are huge amounts of ideas and huge amounts of questions. And if it's a question, then it's something you can research, isn't it? I mean, I'm just coming on the part of the at Innovations, we got the money for a project called Dementia Inquirers, where we just got some small grants dished out to deep groups, peer groups across the network, to carry out their own research. And in Minds and Voices, we got a small grant of £5,000 to develop our own research question, follow it up, investigate it. And our theme was the pros and cons, if you want, but also not just the pros and cons, the specific needs of people living on their own versus people with a care partner. And we just carried out we're halfway through doing our sort of field work, our interviews. We've done our literature review, which was great, with a chap called Brian, fantastic. And, Brian was brilliant. He says, he saw a lot of stuff. Well, that's just all gobbledygook, isn't it? He says, where's the label? Had to almost translate even the abstracts, which are supposed to be the simple summary of things, just so we could get to access what people had done before. But it's just a really interesting piece of work. So I think we're hopefully moving more and more to people with dementia owning the research question and carrying out and leading on that. Too often we're getting, which is nice, we're getting contacted by universities saying, oh, can we borrow some of your group members for a bit of involvement because we're doing this, that and the other research, which is fine. So we've turned the table really, which is nice, and it was a really good idea. So we're halfway through that project really, with and there's a second round of grants I think just gone out to the deep network for people to sort of come up with their own questions to start researching. So research comes in all forms, I suppose, Edward.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
We're coming close to the end of our webinar, actually. So I thought perhaps we could just use the end of the time to give advice to somebody who's just receiving a diagnosis. What words would you say to somebody who have just received a telephone call or a consultation? I'm going to go to Helen and Philip first.
Well, it's a beginning rather than an end.
Yeah.
But also this idea of a team. I mean, I think you need a workspace and a home space to navigate within, where sort of legal and administrative issues are important.
Peter Berry's very good at that. He just says that it's life carries on, but it's just different.
Yeah,
I like that. I like that as a phrase, and you know it. We all need to be and sometimes there are good days and bad days. Sometimes it's very difficult to be positive all the time. But you know, without that attitude, without that keeping focused on staying as positive as we possibly can, without that, you might as well.
Yeah, I'd say reevaluate your priorities. I'd say make sure that what you're doing makes you happy. And you could have a shorter time frame for your plans. Make them achievable. You know, so don't think too far ahead. So we sort of have plans up until March 2022. That's our longest term plan, but we have plans, we have things that we want to achieve, and we make our way through them. Some of them we don't do, and the pandemic has crushed some of those, but some of the things we have done. Philip's taken up the clarinet. I'm learning a new language, so things like that. So reevaluate what makes you happy. I'm sorry, it's a manager in me. I'm going to say, make sure you've got your budget and your money sorted out so that you don't have to worry about that. So obviously you need to live within a budget, and Citizens Advice can help with budgeting. But once you've got all those practical things in place, then it's about making you happy.
Thank you, Helen. I wish I'd written that down.
I don't know, is that too simple? Some people might think that's too simple and idealistic, but it is. It's about making sure you have as many happy days as you can. As Edward said, not every day is going to be happy. There are going to be grumpy days, but have some plans. You don't have to live day to day.
And Damian.
Well, yeah, all that and what? Yes, I mean, the Minds and Voices gang, and the other gang I'm working on the Good Life course with, which is a post-diagnostic course. I can see Jerry's on screen. There's Jerry sending a message, I think. We've also created a post-diagnostic course up in Fife, and the message from everyone is consistent. It's not the end; it's the beginning of a new chapter and new opportunities. And you know, and and as Wendy always says, it's a bummer of a diagnosis. Nobody wants it, but it's certainly not the end. And yeah, that's usually what people say, and I think that's very wise.
Yes.
Find yourself some peers. Meet with others in the same boat.
Yeah, absolutely. All of that.
I absolutely agree. Something that I say to people is that you are still the same person that you were 2 minutes before you received that diagnosis, and so you can continue to be the person that you are. Yeah, and yeah, I think that I'm going to end there actually before I add any more.
Or you get too philosophical.
Yeah, I sounded good then, so I'm not going to. Okay, so we've got a few minutes left, and we do have a question which I shall read out. So this is from Louise Brown, and she says, I manage a domiciliary care service in Chester. What would you recommend our caregivers could do to support you, and what training would you suggest and is available? Which is a massive question, which I don't think we're going to cover in a few minutes. But what I'll do is I'm going to go to Edward and ask, what, as a person with a diagnosis, what helps support you? What kind of support is useful to you?
It's a tricky one. I think that having a positive outlook is probably the most important thing for me. Without that, you might it's so difficult to carry on and to remain as you are. You just can't do it. So staying positive is massive. And as I admit, you know, there are good days and there are bad days, and you acknowledge that there's some, you know, I call them foggy days but you can get through it, and you can live positively with the condition, in my opinion.
Thank you, Edward. And I'm going to go to Philip and ask the same question, which is, what kind of support helps you?
I think there's probably quite a bit of support that could be given in terms of sort of bolstering the ballast of the system, which laymen may not get access to under the normal course of things. So, I mean, take speech therapy, for instance. We had 3 very good sessions with the speech therapist. The trouble was there was no 4th meeting. We're now trying to pick that up, but it would have been good if that had continued, and the person giving the speech therapy, who was very good from a professional point of view, had been able to win the day in terms of adding to what was otherwise likely to be a bilateral dynamic. So I think that's, you know, technical stuff, but stuff which is intelligible and not jargonistic, but where one can add something tangible to things which are out there, which are perhaps maybe a little bit woolly or not as focused as they might be.
Thank you, Philip. So we've actually come to the end of our discussion and the end of our webinar, really. So I'd just like to say thank you to our panelists, Helen, Philip, Damian and Edward. Thank you so much for contributing, and I hope the audience out there has enjoyed our discussion.
Well, I'm going to repeat Liz's thanks, because I thought that was marvellous. Thank you so much, panelists all, and Liz, and of course everyone who's attended, because we've just had the most brilliant chat going on throughout, which I'll make sure I save. Reminder that this webinar's recorded, and we'll make sure that you have the link, everyone who's attended. Kate will make sure of that. I wanted to also tell you about the next webinar, which is sensitivity. So you need your mug of tea again, and this one's about what matters most during diagnosis, and that's on the 18th of November, and there'll be lots of links that you can pick up so that you can register for that. I think that's it for now. Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you, panelists, again. Thanks.